Paul, welcome to DHL team behind the team. And as the line says that we are going to celebrate everyone who's the team behind the Mumbai Indians. So let me start with asking you a very basic question. I know the answer, but everyone wants to know, what is a strength and conditioning coach?
Okay, so strength and conditioning coach is someone that looks after the physical preparation of a player. So it's basically getting them physically prepared to perform at their best, and hopefully that transfers across to their skill set, so we make them a better athlete and a better cricketer.
So it's like what? Flexibility, power, strength. So how does it play
That's
out?
exactly right. So we look at their strength capacity, their development of power, their ability to be able to access their speed, injury prevention based work, we manage their workloads, we have a look at there's also the bigger picture between working with the coaching based group and ensuring that we've got some good plans in place.
So there's a diet component to it. So my question to you is that we Indians eat radioactive curries. So is there a specific diet you have for Indian players?
There is. So we're very fortunate. We have a great sports nutritionist, so Kanita Patel. So she's actually involved in the background doing a lot of our dietary based work. But it's just interesting to see that emotional connection with food in India as well with the playing group.
Yeah.
So a lot of them will come in that are quite new to these type of professional environments through there, and they have some eating habits that are probably a little bit poor from a sports nutrition point of view. You know, biryanis at lunch, or the amount of sweets that they may eat at particular times, and also timing of food. So those things become quite important for us to get on top of, so that they've got good energy to perform. There's a little bit of a misconception about some of the nutrition as well, is that we're not talking about body transformations or necessarily weight loss all the time. We're talking about fuel for performance. So the timing of food and the type of food that we're having through an IPL can be really important to make sure that we're performing at our best. So that's some of the things that are really important.
You said emotional, right?
Yeah.
I can totally understand as an Indian. So if there is a player who comes and says, please give me my biryani, how do you counsel him?
Well, it's education, isn't it? To say, I don't want to take away something that's an emotional connection and something that you love, but there's probably an appropriate time and an appropriate place to be able to consume those sort of foods.
Now let's talk about, the mental state of a player, right? I mean, many times when you're going through a rough patch, you're reluctant and you want to stay in your room. That's the time the SNC coach comes into play, where you're working on his mind.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's the most underrated aspect in relation to that performance environment, and still very misunderstood. And there's lots of things that are going on. At any one given moment in time, you've got some players that aren't playing, who don't see an opportunity coming up, in the near future to play, and it's looking at ways to continue to motivate them to improve and utilise the time that they have to contribute back to the team, and also to continue to perform off the field, so that when we're required, we're coming on. So some of that time can make sure that we're physically improving. We're making some strength-based gains, we're making some conditioning-based gains. It's talking to them about their cricket game and trying to relate that back to the things that we can continue to work on, and having a partnership around that. There might be situations where players aren't performing the way that they'd like to perform on the field. So it's also being a confidant, someone that can be there to have a conversation with them, so they can talk in confidence about things that may be concerning them, and just listening, really, at the end of the day. I'm not there as a coach to solve their skill problems, but you can have some great conversations with players and help to get them back into a better performance state. And then even as a group in general, it's reading the group. At varying points in times, we may need to give them a bit of a kick and a bit of a jolt to make sure that they're up and moving. At other points in times, we may just need to slow things down a little bit, just to make sure that we're moving in the right direction with the right energy at the right time.
This is fantastic, because I remember a coach telling me, sometimes when you look at a problem of a particular player, you focus on the technique, but actually the problem could have been he's had a fight with his girlfriend.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and it's building relationships with players and really getting to understand them and know how they tick and what they do. I often talk about in a tournament that the first 2 to 3 weeks are quite challenging, because you don't yet sync with the playing group and individuals through there. By this stage of the tournament, where we're midway at the moment, I have an understanding about what motivates a player, what makes them tick, the things that annoy them, and you can also read them quite well when they're on the field as well. So by this stage, you're just managing things on a day-to-day basis about looking at a player, seeing where they're at and what's going on through there, and trying to make some good decisions with them, and sometimes without them, and knowing the things that they probably need to do that they're not actually doing. I think that's the art that comes into the process.
Oh, that's beautiful. That means you have a report card for everyone.
100%, and everyone's just as important. That's probably another really important point, that a Raghav Goyal at 19 years of age is just as important as Rohit Sharma inside the group, and they need to feel as though they are important and have a priority that sits around that, and that's really important about group dynamics as well. Every individual is important and has an individual plan.
Give an example how you worked with a certain player and made him or her reach that level which you had started off with, and then you reached that delta.
Yeah, so look, there's a generic process that starts anyway. So at the start of every season, we'll sit down with the individual player and we'll have a conversation about what their priorities and goals are that they're trying to work on. What we're then doing is collecting information. So you would have seen in the background, hopefully, some of our testing-based work. So we're collecting data on how they physically match up. We've got some information from our medical team about their injury history and some potential areas of risk. So then it's a little bit like a recipe. So we're taking all those ingredients and putting that together for an individual plan for every player.
Wow.
And then starting to execute that. So we might look at an ability of a player to improve their overall conditioning and physical capacity.
I mean, you're doing a lot of work. So for the fans, I just want to say that the SNC coach is looking after every person with details, the psychological part, the physical part, and obviously discussing with different coaches about their inputs on the same, and then you're giving an outcome for every player. I mean, that is just amazing. And you use technology as well.
Yeah.
I see those catapult GPS devices. Do you even track when they're going out for a drink or something?
That's one of the concerns from the playing group through there. But the technology can be terrific because it provides an opportunity to be more objective about our decision making and collect data. So we use the GPS units to be able to have a look at the work that they're doing inside training and matches. Now, sometimes we're making decisions to reduce some of their training because they're doing a lot of load inside their matches, or it could be vice versa. We're trying to increase the amount of training-based workload so they can perform in games.
Wow, so for every player, it's this constant feeling that Paul is watching us.
There is a little bit, I must say, at varying points in time. They do get a bit frustrated that they feel like they're being constantly monitored, but it's a partnership with the player to say, look, the more information I have about how you're travelling and tracking, the better I can put a training intervention into place and manage you through the tournament.
But lastly, I just want to ask you, what are the top 5 or 3 reasons that players give for missing a session?
They'll only miss it once, that's what I would say. After that, they learn a lesson that they shouldn't miss a session as they come through. So it's very rare that it does happen. Look, it's hard inside IPL because at varying points in time you've got players that are coming out of a domestic season. So if you're playing Ranji Trophy through the course of the year, you're playing one-day cricket through the course of the year, you're into this morning routine. You have a normal routine where you wake up relatively early in the morning and then you play during the day. The biggest issue with IPL is we transform into this really late evening sort of mindset through there. So a lot of the time it's even very difficult to get to sleep before 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning. And that's not from laziness and that's not from a poor lifestyle, it's just that's the way that training works. We had a practice match last night, we didn't get home until 11:45. By the time that the players settle down from the day, it's 1:30 or 2. So it means that they're getting up at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, which changes their routine. So a long story short, the number one excuse would be, well, I've slept in. But as I say, it only happens once.
Wow, that is amazing, Paul. Truly team behind the team. The number of aspects that you look after is just mind-blowing. Thank you so much for coming on DHL Team Behind.
Absolute pleasure.
Cheers.